Our next speaker would be the Commissioner of Police. The Commissioner of Police, our new Commissioner of Police, is a long-standing police officer. He joined the force in the 80s, somewhere around 1989. He comes to us highly qualified. He has moved through the ranks of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. He has been exposed to all facets of policing. We have in our Commissioner of Police, Mr. Paul Rolle, a highly qualified and efficient officer. And we are so proud that you would join us this morning. And as I had the opportunity to see and speak with the Commissioner briefly yesterday, and he was sharing that he has been married for over 30 years. And when he said that, I told him, we really need your voice in this fight. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Commissioner of Police, Mr. Paul Rolle. Thank you, Mr. Rolle.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Christie. Yes, indeed. I went home yesterday and I confirmed with my wife that it was actually 32 years that we have been married. And this morning we went to do our early morning walk. And as usual, I beat her in the race. Okay. And so thank you very much again, Pastor Brennan. A very insightful presentation. And I'll just continue on from where you left off. And I'll start my presentation this morning with a quote from Virginia Law Register, Volume 3, NS, August 1917, number 4, right of husband to chastise wife. Under the early Roman law, the marital power of the husband was absolute, and he could chastise his wife, even to the point of killing her. During the later period of the Roman law, the husband's power over his wife was much curtailed. You look at Blackstone, which says after speaking of the husband's right of chastisement under common law, says the civil law gave the husband the same or larger authority over his wife. Under common law, and in Great Britain, the husband had the right to inflict moderate chastisement on his wife, provided he used the switch no greater or no larger than the size of his thumb. We in the Bahamas follow British common law and have been taught for many decades that the man is in charge of the woman, and this has been accepted for many years in churches and in the home. By March of 1999, nearly 100 years later, at the Interagency Video Conference for a World Free of Violence Against Women, former Secretary General to the United Nations, Kofi Annan, affirmed, violence against women is perhaps the most shameful human rights violation, and it is perhaps the most pervasive. This statement rings true today as women are still predominantly subjected to violence. In a published report by the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced either physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence in their lifetime. And as many as 38% of murders where women are victims are committed by a male intimate partner. In the Bahamas, domestic violence continues to be a serious concern for women. In 2019, last year, 69% of domestic violence was perpetrated against women, and 60% as of October 31st this year. And that gave us 2 more months to complete that 9%. So it's still very high. Still very high, it's almost 70%. This gender disparity supports the heightened attention for women's rights. During the 1960s and 70s, the world witnessed a mass diverse social movement supporting the equality and protection of women. Many studies support the view that women experience greater occurrences of injury resulting from domestic violence and that they also suffer higher rates of assaults. According to the Royal Bahamas Police Force's statistics, assaults are among the highest category of domestic violence. In 2019, there were a total of 878 martyrs compared to 369 as of October 31st, 2020, which is a marked reduction. Although importance is sometimes disproportionately placed on women, domestic violence threatens men, children, and other family members as well. But due to social norms and biases, men are much more reluctant in their reporting. According to the United Nations, domestic violence is described as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. This violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economical, psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behavior that frightens, intimidates, terrorizes, manipulate, hurt, humiliate, blame, injure, or wound someone. The fight against domestic violence and efforts to avoid it are not limited to the police alone, but a host of community stakeholders, including Department of Social Services, the Bahamas Crisis Center, religious organizations, family, and friends. However, police officers play a more pivotal role in maintaining this problem, as they are more likely to be the first to respond. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us, this arm of law enforcement, while acting as mediators, to have a working protocol and knowledge to deal with any form of domestic violence, as their views, attitudes, and actions play a significant role in determining the outcome. You look at the response of law enforcement. As first responders to domestic disputes, police officers must possess adequate conflict resolution training to quickly and decisively resolve contentions, restore peace, deal with alleged offenses, and prevent any further disturbance from becoming a public nuisance. This is the view of the Royal Bahamas Police Force as presented in policy. This policy on domestic disputes outlines the course of action to be taken. Officers of this organization are mandated to impartially respond to domestic matters and follow a series of actions dictated by the nature of the dispute and the attitudes of the parties. But before the discharge of any action, the police must immediately assess the situation and be uncompromising to not only their safety, but to the safety of all. An assessment of the disputes include early ensuring that there is no evidence of any criminal assault or other offense, ensuring that either of the parties is not in breach of any matrimonial order under the Sexual Offenses or the Matrimonial Violence Act of 1991, ensuring that no safety concerns exist for either parties if they were to remain on the same premises, and ensuring that necessary referral, if any, is made to the appropriate agencies. Police officers rely on the dispatcher to apprise them on the nature of all incidents and history of all parties involved. This is to alert them about the likelihood of danger at the scene. Officers should always be mindful of the role they play and approach this potentially volatile situation with tact and sensitivity. Based on the nature of the domestic dispute, the officers can exhaust numerous courses of action to quell the disturbance and reinstate order. 5 courses of action include mediation. Officers seek to restore peace between conflicting parties. Separation, suggesting the temporary and voluntary separation of the parties, such as one person leaving that environment for the night. Or 3, a warning. If there is a continuing threat of a disturbance, both parties will be warned. 4, referral. If additional specialist skills are needed, the Social Services Department or other specialized agency will be reached to assist in resolving the dispute. Informal referral is also used, including relatives, friends, or religious groups. And 5, arrests. This is absolutely the last resort. However, this is required in cases where there's evidence of injury, threats, or possession of firearm or other offensive weapon. Issues with arrest. While arrest is the last resort, it is not discretionary once the element or evidence of the commission of an offense is present. Arresting the perpetrator at the scene of a domestic dispute is often seen as a double-edged sword. With women and children as the predominant victim, there's often an overarching and underlying psychological, economic, and even physical dependence on male abusers. The fear that uncertainty of relocation, economic instability, legal action, child custody issues, disrupted social networks, and termination of emotional connection with the batterer. Hence, victims who are female may either renege on the obligation to testify against their abusers once legal action is initiated. Statements thus become the primary testimony, and the lack of victim appearances in court may ultimately detract from the legitimacy of the case. As a result, cases may be dismissed. If allowed, this becomes a distraction to officers who may feel as though their efforts are in vain. However, officers still have a non-discretionary obligation to apprehend the suspect in alignment with the arrest policy guidelines. Additionally, there are occasions where attempts have failed to coax the participation of parties, and officers sometimes encounter threats and violence from both offenders and victims. This behavior impedes the officer's investigation process, which can contaminate evidence. Albeit an issue of morale, it is nonetheless a vital issue and factor that this repeated habit of victims can negatively affect individuals' officers' attitudes toward domestic disputes involving female victims who may find themselves in this predicament. Police officers may become susceptible to this deceptive habit of abuse victims and ultimately take such matters less seriously, to the detriment of the integrity of the officer and the establishment of public trust. It is paramount then that police officers, especially those who are deployed in departments and divisions with such duties that will undutifully put them in frontline contact with domestic disputes, be continuously trained, prompted, and reminded of the importance of dealing with each instance as intently and seriously as the Department of the Police officers requires. A look at domestic disputes involving officers. Some view police officers as the most visible and important actors within the criminal justice system because they serve as its gatekeepers. As a result, when allegations of domestic violence arise within the various ranks of the organization, it is important that the same level of scrutiny, sensitivity, and impartiality be given to each officer. It is understandable that some persons may believe that the organization has biases towards police involved in domestic violence. However, this is untrue. The Royal Bahamas Police Force has designed a policy to address this issue, as it is known that domestic violence has no face. Police officers who encounter disputes involving other police officers must ensure that the officer involved is of a lower rank than the investigating officer. It is also required that police control be informed so that assistance can be sent to the investigating officer. There will be no internal disciplinary actions if it is revealed that a criminal offense was committed by the accused officer, as he will be dealt with under the normal legal processes. All matters of this nature will be forwarded in writing to the commissioner from the officer in charge of that division. It is of major note that the job of police officers is a high-stress job. It can be surmised that where there is a high stress levels and inadequate method of de-stressing in play, social ills are bound to wreak havoc. While it cannot and should not be used as an excuse for intolerable behavior, It is general knowledge that individuals under excessive or repeated stress without significant distressing begin to display habits which are harmful to themselves and others, and thus considered unsociable behavior. With the pre-existing knowledge of these risk factors, major organizations around the globe attempt to incorporate healthy social events, habits, and functions as a means of distressing for their employees. In recent times, we have reinstated Police Month, hosted by the Royal Bahamas Police Force, which is one such social event created to engage more healthy social and familial connection and to distress officers while fostering camaraderie. We are not without criticism, and there has always been criticism levied against the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Many times they are without merit. Nonetheless, it is important that the police remain focused on its mandate to protect life and property and to preserve the peace. Over $1 million has been spent on safety and accountability infrastructure. Officers are now equipped with body cam that monitor their interactions with the public. And these cameras will be used for future assessment. Additionally, we have other technologies that will help to guide police officers with their action. But you look at the challenges then in investigating domestic cases. Police officers encounter challenges that may delay effective courses of action. The reluctance of victims and witnesses to participate in initial interviews can be frustrating and too often presents itself as an impediment to the resolution of problems. Systematically, police officers arrive at domestic disputes and are greeted by both parties who may be eager to invite officers into the home with the intention of having the police take their sides in disputes. Domestic violence victims often refuse to provide useful information regardless of whether they initiate contact with the police. Oftentimes, victims just want the police to de-escalate the situation and quell the temper of the aggressor rather than apprehend. This feeling is exacerbated when the offender is the sole provider in the household or serves in a parental role. According to Royal Bahamas Police Force policy, officers must presume that reports of domestic abuse correlates with and connect to patterns of repeated relational strains among the parties involved. The pre-existing notion of repeated abuse prompts officers to be intent on assessing the root of the problem, which initially brought the dispute to the police attention. Albeit, mediation is one of the primary functions of police officers as third-party participants to domestic disputes. It is incumbent upon the organization itself to train its officers and its communities on effective mediation. In the absence of the police, disputes often take time to elevate. It appears that disputes become nuisances and threats to the public peace only after a considerable amount of time, during which simple yet effective mediation techniques can alter the cause of disputes, thus disrupting such patterns. The current era of community policing is one in which such challenges can be met with hand-in-hand partnership between the community and the Royal Bahamas Police Force, as we, in partnership with specialist Bahamas government agencies, including social services department. So although there has been remarkable efforts to curtail the issue of domestic violence, it remains a problem with long-term consequences for the victims. There are still too many women around the world who suffer at the hands of the intimate partners. In the Bahamas, the police has been a reliable arm for the protection of domestic violence victims. Within the last 2 years, the Royal Bahamas Police Force has worked tirelessly to decrease domestic violence in the country. As of October 31st, 2019, there were 3,466 reported domestic matters and 1,955 as of October 31st, 2000. This represents an overall decrease of 44%. However, The police cannot prevent and eliminate this scourge with law enforcement tactics and applications alone. Community policing efforts, along with conflict resolution training, are pivotal elements that must be included in dissuading the social ills of domestic violence and abuse. There is a role for all parts of the society, including Parliament, the courts, the media, non-government institutions, and all individuals. The Royal Bahamas Police Force has implemented reforms in a number of ways, including establishing a sexual crime unit, partnering with civil groups, and changing policies and procedures. The officers are always reminded to follow the guidelines in the policy when interacting with this issue, as to convey sensitivity, patience, impartiality, and calmness. The organization will continue to partner with other institutions to organize seminars and workshops that will assist in providing information and training to better deal with domestic violence. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my presentation this morning.